This is a geometry unit review. I'm going to start telling you vocabulary and showing you what a few things mean, and then I'm going to give you some time to practice on your own and guess the answers, all right? We're going to start with parallel and perpendicular lines. Parallel lines are when you have two or more lines that are always the same distance apart and they're never going to intersect. So here's an example of parallel lines. We talked about how they're like railroad tracks, in that if a railroad track were to get closer and closer together, it would throw off the train. Now, sometimes you're going to see pictures like this where the lines aren't touching, but you have to think, will they eventually touch? And the answer is yes in this case. So these are not parallel lines. These are parallel lines. A perpendicular line are lines that intersect to form right angles. So sometimes we see it like this in the form of a cross or an X, and there's a perfect 90-degree angle. Sometimes we see it like this, and sometimes we just see the angle like that. Those are all perpendicular lines as long as they are straight lines and they intersect to form that corner there, that perfect L, 90 degrees. Now let's talk about angles for a second. We have three types of angles. We have acute angles, right angles, and obtuse angles. Acute angles are any angle that is less than 90 degrees. So anything like this would be an acute angle, 89 degrees or less. A right angle is perfect 90 degrees, and it's usually shown with this kind of rectangle square box right there. So a right angle is perfectly 90, and an acute, let me start that over, is 89 degrees or smaller. So an obtuse angle is anything that is greater than 90, so 91 degrees or higher. Obtuse angles are usually shown like this. They're nice and big, anything greater than 90 degrees. So let's talk about triangles. You can measure triangles by sides, or you can measure them by, angles. And since we just talked about angles, let's start with that one. If you have a triangle that has three acute angles, it's called an acute triangle. If you have a triangle with one right angle, it is called a right triangle. And if you have a triangle with one obtuse angle, it is called an obtuse triangle. Now for the right angle and the right triangle and the obtuse triangle, you only need one, because if you had more than one, we wouldn't be able to make a triangle. If you look here, I make a right angle and another one, I can't close this with just three lines, so it's not a triangle. But for the acute angles, you need to have three to make an acute triangle. You can also talk about triangles based on their sides. If you have a triangle where all three sides are the same length, we call that equilateral. If you have a triangle where two sides are the same length, we call that isosceles. And if we have a triangle with none of the angles the same, we call that scalene. Sorry, none of the sides the same size. That's scalene. So we're going to move on to some other shapes. Let's go to four-sided shapes. These are called quadrilaterals. Oh, that keeps messing up on me. Four sides. So you have your basic square where all sides are equal and all angles are equal. They're all 90 degrees. You have a rectangle where opposite sides are equal in length and they're parallel. We have rhombuses. Now, usually rhombuses are shown like this, but a square can also be a rhombus, and this is why. A rhombus must have all sides equal in length, It must have opposite sides parallel. And it must have opposite angles equal. Next, we're going to move on to a trapezoid. A trapezoid has one pair of parallel sides, and they're opposite. So that would be this one and this one are parallel. And then we have a parallelogram. That's where opposite sides are parallel and equal in length. Squares, rectangles, and rhombuses can all be parallelograms. And the last thing for shapes, we're going to talk about shapes that are bigger than 3-4 sides. So our first one is a 5-sided shape. That's a pentagon. A 6-sided shape is a hexagon. A 7-sided shape, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, oops, I need to close that, is a heptagon. An 8-sided shape is an octagon. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. A 9-sided shape is a nonagon. And a 10-sided shape is a decagon. All right, let's practice. I'm going to give you a second. I want you to name this triangle by sides. If you guessed isosceles, you are correct. I want you to name this triangle by angles. If you guessed acute, you are correct. Tell me the name of this shape. If you said heptagon, you are correct. It has 7 sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Please tell me the name of this triangle based on its sides and its angles. Pretend that's closed up there. All right, if you said scalene and obtuse, you are correct. Nice job.